didn't you go to the NEA office in Minneapolis, St. Paul?
Yes.
That's where you first went to work for the NEA.
That's where I first went to work for NEA, '67. I left Saginaw after. When I was a teacher in Saginaw, and I've been president of the local, and I met the officers of the teachers in Saginaw, and they wanted an executive director, and they met me and asked me to apply, and I did. And they hired me, and I worked for them for 3 years. And during that period, they passed the bargaining law. We had a contract anyway; we'd already negotiated, but everybody was going to be negotiating, so they brought 5 attorneys from NEA in, from Hayes, Handler, Furman, something or other. It was a big law firm, a labor law firm in New York with 100 and something lawyers. And these were young lawyers that came out. Bob Channon was one of them, and they assigned him to negotiate with us in Saginaw and in Bay City. And then we met with all the local bargaining committees that had been set up in all the locals around that whole area, and basically set up a strategy. And there was an organized program. It was a really well done program that we surveyed teachers district by district, found out what their issues were, what they were most concerned about, what their priorities were, what they wanted to get changed, and what they would like to have. And not surprisingly, I guess, it tended to be pretty much the same thing in a lot of places. Obviously, salary was an issue, but class size was always an issue. Duty-free lunch for elementary teachers was always an issue because most of them were working a whole day for 6 or 7 hours without a break to go to the bathroom or have lunch or anything, and they wanted some duty-free lunch for a half hour or something. We've identified the issues that were important to them, and we put together a model contract, and Channon and others put all the boilerplate language together and put together a sample contract. Then we started building, how do you bargain with it? What do you do with it? You take it in, you present it to the board and say, this is what we want. And what are you going to do? And you ask them to look at it and tell them what they're going to do, what they can do. And if they ignore you or say, it's not your job to decide, we're the board and we're not going to share our authority with you, then you have to do something to get their attention, basically. That's the way it seemed to work. But Channon came and he negotiated with us in Saginaw, and we were negotiating already, so we were a little bit ahead. And the board hired the attorney that was advising the State School Boards Association on how to handle bargaining to negotiate for them. So we had an exciting time going on. That was fun watching those two lawyers that were really sharp. But anyway, I didn't need to go into all that. But anyway, afterwards, NEA called me and said, would you like to come work for us? And in '67, I did. I went to Minnesota as a regional director for 7 states up there: Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska, that area. And you came to as a staffer. You were a local negotiator in Western.
Yeah, Big Rapids.
Big Rapids, yeah, Michigan. And when did they hire you?
No, I think they hired me in 66, 67. We had a big fight in Big Rapids the school board hired a teacher, a history teacher in the high school who none of the other teachers respected. In Michigan statute, a school board couldn't hire an administrator that the superintendent wouldn't recommend. And the superintendent of Big Rapids wouldn't recommend Dick Young to be the high school principal. So we had meetings probably for a month and a half with the school board in the community, and finally the teachers voted that they wouldn't support Young. He was a teacher, but I don't think he had more than a couple of votes in the high school faculty. And so the teachers voted not to endorse him, and they voted to recall the school board. And we ran a campaign where we got signatures in the community, so we had enough signatures that it was more than half the votes. So it was clear that the school board was going to get recalled. And Jerry, the guy who was the director of the MEA field service, was up there helping us. What was his last name?
I forget the last names of people I don't like. Sorry.
Well, he wasn't very aggressive.
I forget their names. I wouldn't even remember Jerry. White hair.
Yeah. So they asked me if I wanted to take a job.
Yeah.
So I said sure, and we moved to Utica, where the guy was going to be the state superintendent a couple, 3 years down the road, Phil Runkle. And I worked out of the 6 Mile and DeQuinder office, which is just north of the city of Detroit. And Dale Robinson was already there, who was a black guy that they hired to deal with representation elections with all the union locals in the Detroit metro area. So I went and worked there, and worked in the Region 6 office, which had Macomb and St. Clair and Croswell, Lexington, and my high school football coach was up there as a superintendent. And then I must have been there a little over 3 years. And then I think it was you that came and asked me if I'd be interested in working with the MEA, or I mean the NEA.
I don't know. I assumed it was somebody in the bargaining department at NEA, because they did ask me about it, I'm sure, but I don't remember exactly, because I was really up in the air. I had worked for a year in the office in Minneapolis, and then they decided to have the Midwest office be a separate area, and I moved from there, and they really wanted to get rid of me because I had upset Minnesota so much. The exec there decided I was not a good person, because I'd gotten to know his officers well, and they wanted to bargain, and we created he had promised the state legislature, if you pass a bargaining law, you won't have any conflict. And conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict is the only way progress is made. You have to conflict, at least to the extent that you have conflicting ideas and you sort through them. That's the way progress is made. And he didn't want. He wanted everything to be peaceful and quiet. It
No,
wasn't
what was
peaceful
it
and
in
quiet when we went through that. We went through the same process that we did in Michigan that year. And we had 2 staffers that he had on his staff in charge of it that were really good. We organized that state. We did a good job there.
Well, they had a pretty good staff.
But he was not happy with me because it made him look bad with the legislature because he had made a promise that he couldn't keep. And he was glad to see me go. He thought it would die down when I left. It didn't, but he thought it would.